Welcome to the Terrible Podcast with your hosts from SteelersDepot.com, where you can find all your latest and greatest Steelers news. It's Dave Bryan and Alex Kozora, always lit, talking Steelers. And now, here's Dave and Alex.
Welcome to the Terrible Podcast, Season 15, Episode 86. He's Dave Bryan. I'm Alex Kozora, SteelersDepot.com. Thanks for being back with us this Friday, Steelers Nation. Motoring on through to the weekend. Pro Bowl game started yesterday. That was kind of part one. I think they'll wrap up on Sunday with the official flag football game. Dave, Shrine Bowl just held their game last night. Everyone kind of getting back home from that. Got the Senior Bowl this weekend as well. And so staying pretty busy in Pittsburgh Steelers land. Dave, how you doing?
Happy Friday. Yeah. Got to watch bits and pieces of the Shrine Bowl last night. Our own Joe Clark stayed in Texas and was up in the press box and got to get that experience. It ended up being a blowout. First shutout, right? Ever, I think, as well too. So a lot of a sloppy game overall, but there were some good individual performances. One of them I think we'll talk about a little bit later in the show that I'm going to dive a little bit deeper into. And I know you have a couple of draft profiles up that we'll go over today, and one guy that's got the interest of both of us, I believe, and probably the Steelers too, and we'll talk a little bit of draft talk and some other news. And where would you like to start at today?
Well, let's pick up where we basically left off on Wednesday's show with Art Rooney II. The bulk of his media interviews have come since our last show, mainly on Monday, but he has done a couple one-on-one sit-downs with some of the other local Pittsburgh TV stations, I think, WPXI and WTAE, within the last 24 hours of them being aired, and a couple more comments. I don't think anything groundbreaking or terribly maybe new, but a couple of nuggets of information there. You know, when you had asked me on Wednesday, was there anything else that I wish Rooney would have been asked about that he wasn't? I had one thought that I forgot to bring up during the show. It was kind of like, is there a succession plan? How much longer do you expect to, be the primary owner, overseer of the team? When will you potentially step down and hand the reins to the next Rooney? And he was asked about that in one of these one-on-one interviews and said he basically has no timetable, hasn't thought about it, doesn't really intend to formally and officially and completely retire, citing that Dan never officially retired and the chief never retired, and he kind of hopes to follow in their footsteps, were his exact words. Now, he did note that he's got his son working in the business, Daniel Rooney, and who knows what'll happen. But for those unhappy with Art II, the job that he's done, I think you're going to be, quote unquote, stuck with him for quite some time.
I'm not leaving. The show goes on.
Hey, it's a reference we both understand. I like it.
Yeah. He's not leaving. He's not going anywhere. So it was a good. That was a good question for her to ask as well too. It doesn't sound like he's going anywhere and anytime soon. And if he has his druthers, he'll stay in there for the rest of his time on Earth. So. That was interesting to get that out. Not that it's probably a surprise and all, but how old is he? 74?
He's in his 70s. I don't know exactly how old he is, but he is in his 70s.
All right, so he's not going anywhere anytime soon.
Although it is important to note that the chief eventually ceded some power to Dan, of course, and Dan stepped down, I believe, in 02 or 03, became chairman, still had a role in the organization, but handed things over to Art. Of course, Dan ended up becoming ambassador to Ireland and all that kind of stuff before his death in 2017. So, could Art end up doing the same? That'll probably happen at some point, and so it is important to get to know, we assume, kind of the successor to Art II. That's going to be Daniel Rooney, who's a pretty young guy in his 30s. He works in the business side of things right now. He's had a pretty heavy hand, I think, in trying to get this Ireland game to happen, which could be announced soon. It sounds like we'll just have to wait and see. So do you think any radical changes? I know we're all speculating. We barely even know Daniel Rooney, but if a change in hand ends up occurring, would you expect any big changes for the organization in general?
Not from where we sit right now. Look, the Pittsburgh Steelers are the Rooney's business. It's not like they have outside, industries, or some of these owners around the league have their hands in a lot of things, like Haslam, right? He's got like the truck stops or whatnot.
The Walton's own Walmart,
right? But the Steelers are the Rooney's business, right? So I would expect that they continue on with a lot of the business practices that they've done forever. Really, I would hope that they would look. I mean, this goes back into some of the things that we've talked about, over the last couple of years, and really most recently in the podcast, about some of the precedents and all that this team has, and especially when it comes to things like guaranteed money and cash spending and things along those lines, and even coaching staff size. Because look, there are teams have cash minimums that they must spend over a 3-year period, right? But that's on players and things related to that. When it comes to things above and beyond that, there's obviously, I mean, you can pay a coach as much as you want to pay a coach. You can pay coaching, you can have as many coaches, but all that comes out of your profits, right? Because that's not controlled. Those are not league minimums and all like that. So I would suspect, things outside of league stipulations, as far as things that they have to do, that anything outside of that, when it comes to running the business, would remain the same.
Let me ask you this. I know I'm diving us kind of deep down a rabbit hole to start the show, but it's kind of what we do around here. We've seen a lot of commentary, miss Dan Rooney, and things were better when Dan Rooney was running the team and overseeing the team. Has there been a difference in the way that Dan has run it and conducted things compared to Art? I don't know if I feel that, but I was probably a little too young to really actually feel that. Like I said, I think Dan Rooney ended up kind of handing power over in early 2000s. So does it feel different, or does it feel basically the same, but just the frustration of the team being stagnant kind of being the source of the comments about Art versus Dan?
Well, I have to base that off of what I know and remember, especially in the internet age, right? Because before that, it was all, what you read in magazines, or what because I obviously did not live in Pittsburgh, did not have a subscription to the paper and all like that. So a lot of that reading, obviously, that I've done prior to that has come via archives and things of that nature. And in the internet age, obviously, when Dan was running things and all, at its core, other than the big story, I think, that comes to mind when you ask a question like that, was the whole Roethlisberger thing, right? When, Dan sort of prodded them to, hey, you better look at the quarterback, maybe some influence when it comes to specific drafts or certain players, and specifically maybe a franchise quarterback. But other than that, it feels like, they would just put the people in charge and let them make the decisions. So I think we look at it as, Dan wouldn't have let this happen, blah blah, that kind of narrative, in light of the success that the teams had in the mid in 2000s, and primarily the Colbert era, and then into the early Mike Tomlin era there. And now that they're not winning, and specifically don't have a playoff win since 2016, I think it's easy to say, well, Dan would have never let that happen.
Sure,
but
sure.
To answer your question, I mean, I don't know. I would be interested for somebody to build a list of things of how they think that Dan would be running things differently right now.
Right. That's what I'm getting at. So the question is, is it kind of just the lens of success that is shaping things, or did Dan do something? Was the organization run differently that allowed them to have success more than what Pittsburgh is currently having? I'm open to
Drafting a
argument.
quarterback, drafting Ben Roethlisberger
Yeah,
sure didn't hurt things.
absolutely, for sure. So that's kind of the question. The heart of the question that I'm getting at right now is exactly because I mean, in general, some of the big picture stuff, Art Rooney, patient, potentially to a fault. I think Dan was probably the same way. Saw through some bad Cowher years, ended up paying off for him being generally hands off and letting coaches coach, and but as you said, probably still having influence on some general team direction. I mean, Art pretty much had a helping hand in steering the team towards Najee Harris. We hear him talk about D line, real good hint about where Pittsburgh's going to go early in the draft. So some of the top line stuff, philosophy things seem similar, but you do wonder is the team being run differently, or is it the fact that the team is being run the same, the problem in and of itself, where the team has not evolved into a modern era? Other teams are more forward thinking, have gotten ahead of Pittsburgh, and that's left them behind. That may be the critique at its core.
True. Do you think Bill Cowher left on his own accord? Do you think he just, got, got tired of it, wanted to experience more in life outside? 'Cause you remember there was all those rumors not long after that, he would go to New York and coach and all like that. And obviously he's comfortable now with what he's doing in CBS. And I would doubt that Bill Cowher is going to ever get back into head coaching again, although we do have a nugget about Kevin Colbert to talk about here in a little bit here. Do you and let's add him to it as well too, being as how we're going to talk about Kevin Colbert a little bit today. Do you feel that maybe Bill Cowher was forced out, or do you think Bill Cowher, in other words, leave or we're going to fire you, and really kind of the same with Kevin Colbert?
No, I don't have any sense that Bill Cowher is forced out, and he's never, I think, even hinted at that. If you listen to him talk about his exit from Pittsburgh and read his biography, there was all indications it was on his own. I forget if his wife was sick at the time or if that came
I think that
shortly
was a little
after
bit
he
after,
stepped
wasn't it?
down. May have been that, but yeah, no, I forget specifics, but I just have the recollection of Cowher talking about wanting to get away, and he was on the job for a long time and spend more time with family, I think down in North Carolina where they like to go vacation. And so all indications I have, I forget exactly what things looked like at the time back in '06, but he stepped down on his own accord, the way that Chuck Noll stepped down on his own accord, and probably the way Mike Tomlin will step down on his own accord as well.
I mean, obviously, it's been a long time now since Bill Cowher stepped down and all. Do you think they would have allowed him to coach as long as he wanted to coach?
It's impossible to say, but given just the track record of Pittsburgh, yes.
All right. And what about Kevin Colbert?
Do you think you're saying if he was forced out?
Yeah. Was it, we need to go in a different direction here, and this needs to be your last year, or I mean, how do you feel that all went down?
Again, I've seen no indication of him being forced out. He was basically on a year-to-year basis those final couple seasons. He even admitted that I'm just going to kind of play it by ear, and when I know it's time, it's time. So again, indications for me is that he stepped down on his own volition.
I heard Benz and Pryor talking on the Damashek recent show that he did, talking about something along the lines of the Steelers wear it as a badge of courage. The whole three head coaches, since in the modern era here. Do you think that is something that they pride themselves in, and to a fault? And that was kind of the rabbit hole they were going down, was, look, we pride ourselves on, and we don't want to shake that up and all of a sudden be known as firing a head coach. Whereas before, Chuck Noll, they would go through them like, socks,
For sure.
or underwear or whatever, just, they would switch coaches and all. And a lot of that's not talked about. All you hear about is three coaches in X amount of years. But prior to that, they had a lot of coaches, right? And he didn't even trade a coach and all like that, way back when. Wasn't there an instance of that happening? But at its core, though, do you think that's a fault of theirs, or do you think that's something that they pride themselves in and don't want to get away from?
Well, I would definitely say it is a source of pride. It is rooted in their philosophy of we're going to be the steady ship. We're not going to freak out. We're not going to make the knee jerk reaction because that is to their credit. It's what they did. When Chuck Noll went 1-13 in 1969, old Steelers would have fired that coach and moved on and found somebody else. But they stayed the course and they, succeeded because of it. When Bill Cowher missed the playoffs in 3 straight years from 98 to 2000, would have been very easy and justified to fire the head coach. Now they changed the GMs and hired Kevin Colbert, but they could have cleaned house and started all over, and they stayed the course. And they were in the AFC title game in 01 and 04, and then won a Super Bowl in 2005. And so I think their history says just that patience pays off. Now, to your other point, is that to a fault? There's pros and cons to every philosophy, but yeah, there's a downside to being patient, and sometimes you wonder when does patience just become stagnancy, and that's kind of where Pittsburgh feels like they are right now.
All right, but yeah, I mean, we agree though that at its core, the whole Dan wouldn't let this happen is just because of not winning, not being successful, and especially in the playoffs since 2016.
I mean, that's partially what it feels like. I'm willing to listen to arguments for how Dan ran things because, again, I was just younger and wasn't as in tune to it. So I don't want to say that it's wrong, but I do think it's probably born out of just the angst of the team not having success. Now, I do think Dan was more revered than the way Art was. Not that I think Art has a bad reputation, but Dan was really, they considered a really special individual by the entire NFL. I don't know if Art is at that point a kind of the legacy he's going to leave, but those would have been, big shoes to fill, and that's a high bar to try to match. But yeah, I mean, it's just me talking out loud, basically seeing some of the commentary I've seen the last 2 or 3 days.
Now, in the age of the internet, now I don't know, was Nepo baby even a term back when Dan was running things?
You tell me. That was you know better than I do.
I mean, that I got to be honest with you, I didn't even know what that term meant up until about, I don't know, 3, 4, 5 years ago.
But nepotism was a concept.
Sure, I mean, I
understand
time. Nepotism, but to tag it Nepo baby, that the kind of the buzz. I mean, I understand what nepotism is, obviously, but I kind of wonder if the same criticisms were written in the letters to the editor. You know what I'm saying? Back back when in Dan's early to, or any part of his tenure. Running.
I'm sure when the team wasn't having success, you were getting the same angst. It was probably less visible because the internet wasn't existing or as prolific as it is today. But I'm sure there was similar commentary.
All right. He's not retiring anytime soon. Let's go to what he had to say about we've had winning teams. This was with Ashley Leotis with TAE, the sit down. I'm very comfortable with the culture in this team. I think it is a winning culture. I think people need to keep it in perspective here. Even though we haven't reached our goal of winning a Super Bowl, we've had winning teams. We've been making the playoffs. He goes on to say, I understand the disappointment in terms of not succeeding in the postseason, but it's not like we haven't had some success around here. We just need to continue to build on the culture that we have, and players like TJ Watt and Cam Hayward, those kind of players help you with the culture and make sure that it's being passed down to younger players. Isn't this kind of what Jim said, though?
I think
we've been good,
I think, as you like to say, Art stepped in it here. He pulled a Jim Rooney in the commentary, and it's interesting because when Rooney was asked about Jim's comments early in the week, he gave, like you said, a very terse, short answer of, that's Jim's opinion, and I'm happy he's selling his books. But then he basically gave the same answer that Jim gave of said, hey, fans, calm down. You're spoiled. We're winning. We're in the playoffs. We're in the hunt. This winning thing is hard in the NFL. Can't expect us to be contenders every single season. And you can imagine that it's not gone over well from the fan base, nor should it.
Right. How should he have handled this particular media tour? I mean, what if he would have come out? What if he, and in so many words, I guess he has kind of said it, but is there a fault with saying, look, we're probably not going to be where we need to be until we find the next franchise quarterback? Is there anything wrong? Is there anything wrong with casting expectations as being anything other than we're going to win the Super Bowl this year, every year?
No, but what I think you can't do is you can't sound content with where Pittsburgh is at. In those comments of, hey, let's keep perspective, we're winning games, we're making the playoffs, it sounds, and it may not be accurate, it may just be a gaffe by, Art, and I assume he wants to win the Super Bowl. It just sounds like he's content with the status quo, and that is the last thing the fan base wants to hear.
All right. How do you go about changing that status quo, though? Okay.
Yeah, I mean, it comes back to quarterback, obviously. And Rooney talked about the importance and its priority, and everyone understands that, you can take even a casual fan knows the importance of a franchise quarterback and how that is the key to success in turning this franchise around. So it's all easier said than done, but you just can't make those comments that sound like you're okay with where this team is at.
Other than Art coming out and saying we're firing Mike Tomlin, and or we're firing Omar Khan. What do you think the fan base at it? Because you're not going to get a consensus here, but what do you think the fan base at large would have liked to have heard or seen Art do up until this point in the offseason right now? Because I mean, at this point, we still haven't heard about any coaching changes other than they're probably not. They're not going to be wholesale changes, but what do you think the majority of the fan base would have liked to have heard out of Art Rooney up until this point? Other than firing Mike Tomlin or firing Omar Khan.
I feel like we're going to be in June going, they're going to make coaching changes, Dave. They just haven't made them yet. We're still waiting, but I think by early next week, like I said on a previous show, we'll get some clarity on that. Short of any sort of sweeping change directive, the fan base was not going to be happy. There's not a lot you can say, not a lot to spin a historic 5-game collapse, losing streak, and another one and done season. And so, and again, that's fair. The fans should be asking for more. They should expect more from this team. They shouldn't be content with just the status quo and the standard that feels like is getting lowered by the year in Pittsburgh. So I'm not critiquing the fans on that, but yeah, it's hard to win the media scrum when you're coming off the end of a season the way Pittsburgh has.
All right. I did find that line of comments that we just read quite interesting, especially on the heels of what all I mean, he basically said the same thing, right? Mm-hmm. Hey, we're pretty damn good. We're not good enough, but we're pretty damn good.
Which is kind of crazier because you already saw the feedback from Jim Rooney, which did not go over well. So I'm not sure why you would repeat it, but I think he was just trying to find an answer to that particular question because the question was about, do you have a winning culture? And he was trying to say, if I'm being very charitable, of like, we have a winning culture because we are literally still winning. We are still making the playoffs. We still have some of the foundations of a locker room that is capable of winning. I think that was his point, but he really said it inartfully, and excuse the pun, and the feedback has been pretty vicious.
All right. Had he come right out of the chute when he was addressed with the Jim Rooney comments and said, yeah, in other words, gave this same response, and in other words, backed up what Jim said, I mean, obviously still would be in the same point here, but would that have helped his cause any?
No. I think if you say anything like what Jim Rooney has said, the fan base is gonna not respond well. And again, nor should they. You shouldn't hear those things and be like, hey, we're winning games, keep perspective. I mean, it's not even like they're winning playoff games. It's not like they're just falling short of a Super Bowl. They're falling short of getting past the wild card round. They're falling short of winning a playoff game. So, if the expectation was, why aren't you guys winning the Super Bowl every year or in the Super Bowl every year? Okay, that's probably too high of an ask for any team that isn't on a dynasty run the way the Chiefs are. that would be fair. But, if where this team is at, they are missing even minimum expectations for the franchise. And you just can't give that answer knowing how the fan base feels, knowing the season you're coming off of, knowing the drought that you're in, and expect that to satisfy anybody.
Do you think Mike Tomlin has too much autonomy now post Kevin Colbert? In other words, this is really, and Mike Tomlin at this point now has a large say in drafting players and signing free agents and putting the 53-man roster together. Does the church and state need to be separated a little bit more? Does Art need to go to Tomlin and Omar Khan and say, let Khan, have a larger say in, or the final say in buying the groceries, and Mike Tomlin, you need to just concentrate on cooking with the ingredients bought?
I mean, I think you look at the structure. I can't speak to exactly how things work. I think it is certainly fair to assume that Tomlin has plenty of control over the direction of this team and the players they add, free agency and draft. I think it's probably only grown, to your point, post Kevin Colbert, because Omar Khan does not have that deep-rooted scouting background that the Colbert did, and Colbert was there before Tomlin. Now, technically, Khan was also there before Tomlin as well, but Colbert was in the de facto GM role and Khan wasn't. So the point is that dynamic of power has probably shifted towards Tomlin even more so. So yes, again, we've talked about you have to examine everything as an organization. How are we structured? How do we work? Everything should be under the microscope and reevaluated. Some things change, some things stay the same. But I also will say Tomlin is the fifth highest paid coach in American sports. He is a well compensated individual, and that should come with a lot of power. And if you're going to pay that guy that amount of money, he should have control. And that kind of comes with the territory, I think. So that he's got to earn his paycheck and make those decisions. And if you're trusting to pay him apparently almost $17 million per season, then you should trust him to put together your team.
All right, going into this season, let's say the moment that everything was done, the 53-man roster is set at that point. And at that point, Art said, okay, sit back, or I guess what I'm getting at is, could any other head coach in the NFL currently have taken over what was given him on day one of the season and either equaled the success or non-success, whatever you equaled the season that the 2024 Steelers had, or been better, win a playoff game?
Yeah, I just, it's hard to say. I mean, these are hypotheticals, obviously. So I'm sure somebody could do better. I'm sure somebody could do worse. How do you judge it? How do you predict it? It's impossible to say.
All right.
But let me ask you this. I got a question in my mailbag, and this is not an uncommon question, but somebody asked me, where do you rank Mike Tomlin among the NFL head coaches currently? And it's not something I usually do, but I wanted to act it out. Obviously, we don't study the rest of the NFL as intently as we do Pittsburgh, but I came up with a list. I don't know if you had a feeling, Dave, or if you kind of want to do a short little exercise on kind of the head coaches you would put ahead of Mike Tomlin. I'd be curious to see how close we are between our answers.
All right, let me pull up the teams here. Let's see here. Obviously, I would rank Andy Reid ahead of Mike Tomlin.
Well, let's go through division by division, kind of make it easier. So AFC East: Bills, Dolphins, Jets, Patriots. Any of those head coaches, would you put McDermott above Mike Tomlin?
I mean, McDermott's got his team into the playoffs and winning some playoff games. If we're talking recency, obviously here, I think you would have to rank the Bills, McDermott ahead of Mike Tomlin right now.
Okay. AFC North: Ravens, Bengals, and Browns. Harbaugh.
I mean, absolutely, Harbaugh's got to be ranked higher right now. I think. Zach Taylor, man, it sure felt like that team, even though their defense was as bad as what it was and all. I mean, they did have Joe Burrow for the whole season. I mean, it's a major. Their fan base has got to be highly disappointed right now with them not getting in the playoffs, right? So,
And didn't last year, obviously Burrow got
right,
hurt, but it has been 2 years.
right.
But they've been to a Super Bowl more recently than Pittsburgh.
Yeah, I would say I would put him on par with Mike Tomlin. I don't know if I'd rank him.
You got to above or below. Make it choose.
I would put him below because I think just based on recency alone, he should have had that team further this year.
Okay. AFC South, Texans, Colts, Jags, and Titans.
I mean, Houston's the only one to talk about, but I would put him. I would put that lower than Tomlin.
You put D'Amico Ryans below Tomlin?
Right.
Okay. I would too. And then the West, the Chiefs, the Chargers, the Broncos, and the Raiders.
Obviously, Andy Reid would be ahead of Mike Tomlin. Harbaugh's only 1 year in, and it feels like they should have won that playoff. You know, it feels like they should have been able to win a playoff game this year, even in his first year. So I would rank Tomlin ahead of that Harbaugh.
Okay. What about Sean Payton? Just as a coach, I mean, it can be whatever criteria you want, but
right.
Just as a coach, coach to coach, who's a better coach?
Sean Look, Payton. It was real ballsy what Denver did, and I think Payton doing what he did to run Russell Wilson out of town and to get the young quarterback and progress him the way that he did kind of speaks volumes within that. And then you look at his resume and everything, what he did in New Orleans and all like that. I think I would rank Sean Payton ahead of Mike Tomlin.
Okay. Go to the NFC: Eagles, Commanders, Cowboys, and Giants.
Sirianni, I mean, he's had that team competing, right? And even through some quote unquote perceived kind of turmoil with the wide receivers and handling kind of some volatileness within that. And, I mean, they're obviously in the Super Bowl again now. So I think I would rank Sirianni ahead of Mike Tomlin.
Okay. NFC North: Lions, Vikings, Packers, and Bears.
Obviously, Dan Campbell is kind of a Mike Tomlin on steroids, I think. Dan Campbell is what I think a lot of fans look at, would like Mike Tomlin to be more of. Players coach, aggressive, speaks what's on his mind, not what people want to hear. So I think I would rank Dan Campbell ahead of Mike Tomlin right now.
Okay. What about Kevin O'Connell in Minnesota, 14-3 this year?
I kind of would put him on par. I being as how I can't put him on par, I would rank him below Mike Tomlin.
Okay. NFC South: Bucks, Falcons, Panthers, and Saints.
Nobody of those four I would rank ahead of Mike Tomlin.
And the Saints still don't even officially have a head coach. Finally, the West: Rams, Seahawks, Cardinals, and Niners.
McDermott, I think, is a damn good coach. And,
McVay, you mean?
I mean, McVay. McVay's a damn good coach. And, I mean, there was a point in the middle of this season where it looked like that team was left for dead. And, talk about all the trading and all like that. He, even though the division, wasn't super, it's not the AFC North. Long story short, I would rank McVay ahead of Tomlin.
What about Kyle Shanahan?
I don't think he handled all that. I think he should have got a lot more out of that roster this year. Really, I think and look, I understand they had the injuries and all like that, but I think he let the team down. So I would rank Tomlin ahead of him.
Okay. I should have asked you too when we did the AFC West. Pete Carroll, I know he just got hired by the Raiders, but just as a coach overall, long resume there. Would you take Pete Carroll as a better coach right now over Mike Tomlin?
A
little bit tougher because he was out of the league last year.
I would say probably yes.
Okay. So Pete Carroll over Tomlin. That's fair. So to tally it up, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. You have 8 head coaches ahead of Mike Tomlin. Of course, putting Tomlin 9th in the NFL. That sound right to you?
Yeah, roughly. Yeah. I think there's some discussion maybe to have maybe on a couple of them, but yeah, roughly, where do you have them?
I had Tomlin eighth, so very close. The coaches I had over him, Andy Reid, both Harbaughs. I put Jim and John ahead of Tomlin. I think Jim, it was, yes, 1 year with the Chargers, but he turned the team around. They were a mess on the Brandon Staley. This guy is just won everywhere he's gone. He's like Tomlin. He's like a culture guy, but he's able to install it quicker, better. I mean, he's basically what Tomlin is trying to get back to about we're going to be physical, we're going to be tough, we're going to change the culture of this team. And Harbaugh just seems to instantly bring that no matter where he goes, from his days at Stanford, the Niners, Michigan, the Chargers this year. So anyway, both Harbaughs. John was close because John's in a similar spot of can he get over the hump and can you win with Lamar? But the Ravens just feel more forward thinking than Pittsburgh, and Harbaugh more so than Tomlin in analytics and quarterback mobility, all that kind of stuff. So I gave the edge to John there. And then I put Sirianni, Dan Campbell, Sean McVay, and I put Kyle Shanahan ahead of Tomlin too. This year was a down year, ton of injuries, but just overall body of work. Shanahan, X's and O's mastermind. And so I gave the nod to Shanahan.
What about LaFleur in Green Bay?
I thought about that. I just don't know if LaFleur's been on the job long enough to have a strong track record. That was the same with O'Connell. O'Connell had a great year, obviously, but can he do it over a longer period of time? Is going to be, I think, the question there. I just, in my gut, I didn't think LaFleur is a better coach than Mike Tomlin.
I mean, they've had to go through and they've navigated the whole quarterback changeover situation fairly well, and in the process they didn't go too far back because in 2021 they were 13-4. I'm looking at it here. When did he become head coach?
Let me double check here. It was 2019.
Okay, so in 2019 he went 13-3. Obviously you got Aaron Rodgers there, right? 2020 13-3. Now obviously hadn't had a Super Bowl win in forever. 2021, 13-4. 2022, 8-9. When did was that Rodgers' last season?
I believe 21 was let me double check on that when Rodgers' last season was. No, it was 22 because 23, that was when he tore his Achilles for the Jets, right? Yeah, right. 2022. Yeah, 2022 was Rodgers' last season.
Okay, so they went through there. Okay, the quarterback's on his last leg, right? And we got a guy in waiting that we need to try to find out what they had. And then they turn around in 2023 and had at least above average season at 9-8, and then boom, 2024 they go 11-6 and back in the heat of things, even though they lost to the Eagles in the wild card.
Yeah, that's a really fair point. His overall record, he's 67-33 as a head coach, a 670 winning percentage, which is, he's had exactly 100 career games. That's probably one of the best marks ever if I had to guess for somebody through 100 games. So that's a really compelling case.
Right. And haven't they had to kind of navigate the move on from the veteran franchise quarterback to a new quarterback? And look, they had a very young wide receiver group. This year specifically, especially when you look at the cost involved, and they obviously had moved on from Devontae Adams and all like that. So I think there's something to be said with what they've been able to do in Green Bay throughout this. And then now moving forward, they're you would think they're an organization to have to compete with, right?
Absolutely. And they have done a better job than maybe any other franchise in the NFL in transitioning from one quarterback to the next, from Favre to Rodgers, which wasn't LaFleur, obviously, but as a franchise, and then Rodgers to Love, which again, I think is more support for my theory that you don't have to have a top 5 pick to go draft a quarterback. They got Rodgers, who fell. They got Love late in the first round. So would you put LaFleur ahead of Tomlin?
Yeah, I think I'll end it this way. I think on my list, with some discussion and a little bit more deeper discussion, I would have Mike Tomlin no higher than 8th. Somewhere in the 8, 9, or 10 ranking for Tomlin.
But you'd put LaFleur ahead of him if you had to choose?
I think so, just based on the way we just talked it out right there.
Okay, that puts Tomlin at 10th on your list, and if you're going to keep the other names ahead. And you know what? You've convinced me. I think it's a really good case. I'll put LaFleur ahead of Tomlin as well, so Tomlin would bump down to 9th on my list.
Had Tomlin navigated this quarterback changeover, and even this year specifically, and won a playoff game, then I think that would have bumped him up a couple of spots.
Okay. I mean,
because it's not like he didn't see this thing coming, especially this year. The whole they went after the Kenny Pickett thing. That didn't work. First, I mean, obviously, first they tried to go the whole Mitch Trubisky thing. That didn't work out. They saw that at the same time of trying to draft a quarterback. And then obviously that didn't work out. And then knowing that they had everything else what in their mind, at least in Tomlin's mind, built around that other than the quarterback. They tried a lot of different. They tried two different types of mud to throw at the wall. Right, a veteran, experienced Super Bowl winning previous franchise quarterback in Russell Wilson, and a young up and comer with draft pedigree in Justin Fields. Thinking surely one of those two will be enough on that offensive side of football to at least get us to a playoff win. And it did, and it didn't. So you got to get negative with that because everything else around that was supposedly built up around it.
Sure. I mean, yeah, Pittsburgh has tried every avenue to land a quarterback and nothing is stuck, to your point. I do want to give Pittsburgh some credit, and it's a dirty word right now. They avoided the bottoming out from the quarterback change that most teams experience when they lose their franchise quarterback, the way the Patriots did, the way the Colts did post Peyton Manning, the Giants post Eli. Other examples, probably a bunch of other examples out there that you can point to. Pittsburgh has avoided that, but it has kind of left them in this stuck middle ground.
Right. Is that good or bad that they haven't bottomed out? A lot of fans now would just rather,
Sure.
would have rather have seen them. Okay, you gave it the old college try here. And thankfully that college try did not end up in picking 20 where they picked for seemingly forever, in the 20s.
Yeah, no, I get the value in that, but my point is just to say that is a really hard thing to do, is to lose your franchise quarterback and then just not kind of collapse as a franchise and have to go through some especially difficult years before you turn things around. To lose your franchise quarterback and still be a regular season contender is just rare to do, just from the examples that I've cited. And so there is something to be said about that, but I do understand the cost. How does it hurt you at finding your next franchise quarterback? Again, I would still argue that that's not an excuse for Pittsburgh. You still can find a franchise quarterback even as a winning team, but that's all arguments I've made before.
All right. What Rooney also said in one of these interviews, was asked about Mike Tomlin. He says, I don't think you, and this is kind of the second time he said this, but he kind of tapped on more of, well, we've done good. He says, I don't think you win as many games in this league as Mike has won and not be a good coach. The fact that we haven't had success in the postseason, that's something that I think will come with Mike. We've been in the hunt every year and have made the playoffs most of the time that he's been here. It's unfortunate that we haven't been able to take that next step. That's what we're trying to do. If you're looking past this year, it doesn't sound like Mike Tomlin's going anywhere anytime soon, even past 2025.
Yeah, I would not expect Mike Tomlin to be fired under his current contract. He just got paid, like we said, a boatload of money. The Steelers barely fire any coaches, even positional coaches mid-contract. They don't like having that kind of dead money. That is actually a very Dallas thing to do, despite how different Jerry Jones and Art Rooney II are. Jerry Jones hates having dead money for coaches. He hangs on to those guys. They coach out their contract. And so if Pat Meyer's going to do it, I bet you Mike Tomlin's going to do it too.
Okay.
What else? Art Rooney talked about a number 2 receiver is going to be high on this team's list this offseason. Acknowledged the team made attempts to add a number 2 receiver during the season and didn't work out. And so it sounds like they're going to attack that and address the receiver position. Am I putting my tinfoil hat on too tight, Dave?
I think I know where you're going with this. Go ahead.
When Rooney says we need a number 2 receiver, does that imply George Pickens will stay as the number 1 receiver?
That's I knew you were going to go down that,
Mm-hmm.
and to tap on what else he said about another comment about George. We need George has been good. We think there's better in George. We need to try to get him there. We need a number 2 wide receiver. And if you're talking about a number 2 wide receiver, that means somebody's going to be number 1. And there's really only one wide receiver right now on this roster we're talking about, and that's George Pickens. So it does sound, at least right now, either that or they're putting on the disguise of, oh yeah, we're fine with George. But if you want to call about George, go ahead and call. I get no sense that they're trying to put on any type of charade that George is going to be gone this offseason.
Yeah, I said this even before that comment came out, that I think what will happen with Pickens this offseason is nothing, at least from the standpoint of, will they extend him? Will they trade him? I think neither. I think he just stays. He probably puts up a stink about a new deal or whatever. Hopefully it's less dramatic than what we're envisioning right now, and that he plays out his rookie year, the final year of that contract, and Pittsburgh evaluates his growth, maturity, if any, and decides from there. I don't think they want to trade him, knowing that they have no receiver room. If they do deal him and trying to retool an entire receiver room soup to nuts, it's difficult to do in one offseason with other needs that Pittsburgh has. And I don't think they obviously want to extend him because they still need to figure out if they can trust this guy in the long haul, and he's not earned that trust. And so I think he will just play out his final year of his rookie contract.
And look, George Pickens, the player, at a whole, is fine to have on your team. George Pickens, the individual and the teammate, is what, and the attitude is what you, and the growth is what you worry about. So if George goes out there and performs on the field and does take this next step on the field and performs even better, or up to even more than or up to, because look, I mean, he could still be a better player, right?
Sure, there's still room for growth there. He's 23,
right.
Yeah.
But what if the baggage that comes along with him ends up being something that ends up being a huge distraction for this team?
Yeah, that's the yin and yang of it. Is you're trying, it's big talent, big headache. You're trying to see which one outweighs the other.
And if the headache portion of it ends up being a huge talking point again throughout 2025, and this team, A, doesn't get into playoffs, or B, this team gets into playoffs and doesn't win a playoff game yet again, then all of it's going to be, well, man, why didn't you take the opportunity to just get rid of him, try to retool that room and get it ready for 2026?
Sure. I mean, that'll be the talking point. Absolutely. But the bottom line is I'm just focused on what they're going to do with Georgia this offseason, because that is kind of the story once we get past the quarterback decision and outcome. And I think what will happen is the team will just say, we're not going to do anything. If Pickens wants to skip OTAs, which I'm sure he will, if he wants to hold in, okay, that's your prerogative, but we're not going to give you an extension. I think if a team were to come in and call, and if Pickens starts holding out, then those are the, not alarm bells, but those are the signs of, hey, this guy may want to go somewhere. Maybe want to, should we call up Omar Khan and see if we can work out a deal? I think there'll be some trade discussions where Pittsburgh will be answering the phone, but I don't think they have an appetite right now to deal George Pickens.
I think, and I don't think they'll give him away for a bag of magic beans. I think that's kind of the posture that they will take this offseason. We're willing to work with him, but hey, if you want to blow our socks off, we will listen to it.
Right. Yeah, I think they'll listen. They won't shop George Pickens.
Right. And like we said, we're going to be talking about George the rest of the offseason. So
right. Once we get past quarterback, and speaking of quarterback, Rooney, a little more clarification on the quarterback situation. Did confirm in one of those interviews that he did. The Steelers have spoken with both Justin Fields and Russell Wilson. Those talks will continue contractually in terms of who will get re-signed and who will not. And Rooney, although a safe assumption, assumes that whoever re-ups will be the week 1 starter for this team in 2025.
Right. And probably a little bit of posturing within there, not wanting one to know the other, oh yeah, we're fine with either of them, whichever one can give us the best deal,
Yeah, you don't want to sit there and say, we want to re-sign Justin Fields, because then the leverage goes all in his court and they're going to use that against you. So you cast a wide net. I'm okay with Rooney being a little vague here and kind of letting this process play out. That's fine with me.
And it goes without saying they would like to get whichever one of these guys, and he said as much, to a multi-year deal.
Yes, and sooner than later, I think was his
right.
commentary, something to that effect. I mean, I'm gonna assume that before the legal tampering period begins in that second week of March, one of these guys, Fields or Wilson, will have re-signed with the Steelers.
Yeah, that would be at least my expectations, or at least the first day once the tampering period ends, that they get some sort of conclusion to this.
Yeah, but I think sooner the better, as Rooney said, get some clarification, get that box checked, and go from there. Do you still have any differences?
And it needs to be that anyway. They need to know day one of the new league year who their quarterback's going to be, because you're going to use that probably as a shopping tool to get maybe a free agent wide receiver or two.
Yeah, and I think even earlier than that, because legal tampering period, you don't want to be sitting there on the actual new league year first day and then get that quarterback locked up, because half these deals are done over that tampering period anyway.
That's true.
At least for these big name receivers. And T. Higgins, sounds like the Bengals don't expect to keep both T. Higgins and Jamar Chase. I think it was Duke Tobin or some front office personnel member that said it'll be hard to keep and pay Chase and Higgins. And so Higgins looking more likely to hit the market. But again, we'll wait and see.
And if he does, and everybody knows where both of us stand on that, we'd like to see T. Higgins in the black and gold. But I'll be shocked if that happens. And I invite it to happen. Change in precedent, change in guaranteed money. But once again, T. Higgins is going to be, if he does hit the market, he's going to be probably the number one free agent on the market this year, period. Mm-hmm. And with that comes bidding, right? And comes guaranteed money and ability to win and everything that comes along with that. And if you're going to spend that kind of money too, that your T. Higgins is not going to be a number two in Pittsburgh, right?
No, he'll be a number one. He'll be paid as a number one and be used as a number one.
All right. What's George Pickens going to think about that?
Yeah, it's a great question. That's why I don't think T. Higgins is coming to Pittsburgh.
Right. I don't either. Long story short.
It's not because of George, but it's just
right.
the bidding war, dynamics. The structure, just everything. I think they will sign a veteran wide receiver. I think they will pay somebody good money for it, but not T. Higgins, not at that level.
Devontae Adams, right?
Devontae Adams. I haven't gone through the whole list, but somebody like that. I don't want to put a number on, a 15 to 20 million per year, maybe somewhere in that range.
Okay, agreed. All right. What else is left over from Art Rooney in these recent ones?
I think that was basically it. He did confirm if there is an Ireland game for 2025, it'll be considered a home game for Pittsburgh. And so the Steelers would have 8 games at Acrisure, 8 road games, and 1 in Ireland. We're slated to have 9 home games this year, but probably going to be the home team. There was a report, and I want to try to find more information that the home team for international games get paid extra money by the NFL, but I can't find recent information on that, and I really couldn't find the exact source of that information either. Do you have any knowledge of that?
No, but that would surprise me as part of the decision making. And look, they know how popular that would be in Ireland and all like that. I mean, there's a lot to be gained by the extra game being in Ireland and not losing a quote unquote, one of the 8. Because there's something in the lease with Acrisure that they have to play there at least eight regular season games and all like that. So all of it adds up, and yeah, there's probably going to just from the global aspect of it alone and the merchandise and everything that goes. Yeah, there's going to be money made off that.
Yeah, so just not that it matters much, but I just have seen that once or twice doing some research. Yeah, I think that's one reason why Pittsburgh has not played an international game in over a decade, because I don't think they really could have done that as a home team because of the lease in Acrisure, and maybe the logistics as the away team just didn't work out in each season. And plus there was construction in Mexico City on the stadium, which scrapped that, and then COVID and all that kind of stuff. So long overdue. And again, I'm still fully expecting this team to play in Ireland come 2025.
All right, you had a post up this morning, your biggest takeaways from Art Rooney's media tour this offseason. And run through your overview real quick.
Yeah, it's largely what we talked about. Najee Harris is not going to return. Pickens, they're going to stand pat. No extension, no trade. Veteran receiver, D-line high in the draft. Quarterback class isn't great. doesn't still fully get the fan frustration with those comments about perspective and we're winning, very tone deaf from Art Rooney, and still a bit of old school in his soul. Run the ball, stop the run. Not necessarily wrong, but it is some of the familiar notes he seems to play every season that still drives how this team operates.
And then once again, he had said some young blood along the defensive line. So just re-emphasizing that, and it's a good year to have to do it with this defensive line class. But there's going to be a defensive lineman taken early in this draft.
Yes, you can take that.
And I guess piling on top of that, this is it seems to be the deeper that I get into this, I can't remember, at least from what fits the Steelers' perspective. I can't tell you the last time that there's been this good a defensive line class. So I'm hoping that they double dip in this position. It wouldn't hurt me to. What is that they can obviously you'd like to see him get a franchise quarterback in this draft, but the odds of that probably happening are low. We already know that wide receivers probably going to be something on the offensive side of football that they address and have to address, right? They're probably going to take a running back at some point in this draft as well too. But other than those needs, I mean, quote unquote needs, I mean, the rest of it's on the defensive side of the ball, and specifically it's on a defensive line.
Well, I think D-line is as big a need and as big a likelihood of being a top pick as any position right now. I mean, I think there's still some little things to address. I think guard could still be a sneaky thing later in the draft because you got Isaac Seumalo, a free agent after this year. They need to address some safety depth too, because Minkah, what's his contract? He signed through. When does he sign through? Let me actually double check that here. I mean, regardless, you have, KZ's aging out. He's a free agent to be. You really don't have anything behind. Minkah signed through 2026, but you need to get some depth there behind Elliott and Fitzpatrick. There really is not really anything there right now, and protect yourself versus injury. And if Minkah does not turn things around, etc. So I'm kind of losing your point here. I apologize.
Okay, here's my point. Based on where this franchise sits right now, and obviously that can change the closer we get to the draft. But knowing what it looks like right now, would your desire to see this team draft 2 defensive linemen?
For me, when I talk about double dips, it's usually not something I go into the draft with the need. It's usually an opportunity where the first pick comes because I do need the help at the position, and I take the second guy because just the value is just staring me in the face too much. And as you said, it's a really good D-line class, and so that's possible. But I just look at double dipping as more of an opportunity value thing than I do anything else.
I would double dip. That's where I sit right now.
Yeah, it's not wrong to do. I just don't know if I have that mentality. If I want to double dip in the draft, it's usually just because I double dip because there's just a really good player there, and I sit there and say he's just the best player on our board, and we just want to add this guy in the 4th round or whatever.
All right.
Let's do a couple other things before we get into the draft. Some other just kind of loose ends to tie up. Some Matthew Stafford trade talk last couple of days. Really weird to me, Dave. I'm not sure where it's really coming from. Stafford is returning in 2025 and his contract is bloated. The Rams seem to have no desire to trade him. Some people have speculated could Pittsburgh show interest. I really have no interest in exploring that. Do you, Dave?
No, I mean, I think obviously he can, in the right offense, in the right situation, surrounded by the right people, could still win some games. But I think you'd be. I would look at it as another 1-year Band-Aid of them trying to do something similar to what they did this last season.
Yeah, I mean, I think Stafford's a better quarterback than Fields or Russ, but it's not a long-term play. You wonder how much longer Stafford's going to play for. He's had a long career. He's been beat up quite a bit. He's been pretty durable, but he's played hurt and played through stuff. It just does not seem like this team is not a Stafford away from competing, I don't think.
I agree.
Let's talk about some other quick things here. Pro Bowl games. They started yesterday. Some Steelers in some of those mini games. Again, no in-stadium formal football game, but there was Chris Boswell, Isaac Seumalo in the dodgeball game. There was Minkah Fitzpatrick in the relay race. There was Cam Hayward, Miles Killebrew on some get to know your do you know your teammate game show. Russell Wilson had that passing drill, which he did a pretty good job in. So will you watch any of this stuff? Did you watch any of this stuff last night, Dave? Will you watch the things on Sunday?
I had it on for bits and pieces, like the wide receiver competition and all like that. I thought the giant hands was a cute thing within that. I watched what Russell Wilson did in the passing challenge there, trying to hit the targets. Other than that, the only thing that's really stuck out about all that is this morning on Good Morning Football, it looked like they were really trying to sell how great this was. I think they even used the word, must see TV for 90 minutes, how compact it was and how it moved along and how it felt very, you guys got to sell this thing.
Yeah, it's tough. I mean, the pace of it was pretty good. It moved pretty quickly. They packed a whole lot into that 90 minutes, and I watched partially because I was like, okay, A, nobody get hurt. I need to watch it for that. And then B, if anything kind of crazy happens, then I guess we should write about it or make a note about it or whatever. It is just tough. I think every sport is dealing with how do you fix all-star games. The NHL's not even having an all-star game this year, right? They're doing this, that Four Nationals. Isn't that replacing the all-star game, I believe?
I don't even know. Yeah, I mean that you're probably right. I haven't really paid attention to that enough to know. If they want my attention back, they would turn this back into the old ABC Superstars again, where they have these guys swimming and running and relay and lifting
But the guys want to do that. The guys want to take their time off and go rigorously have an event.
I mean, I probably not.
Yeah, I think that's the issue. I think that sounds really cool, and I love some of that. Watching those old clips because didn't like Swan or
and
all those things.
It definitely captivated me as a kid. I've talked about that several times. It's burned in my memory of watching, the NFL superstars.
Right, and even stuff in the early 2000s, late 90s, the bench press. I still have like a childhood core memory of like Larry Allen just crushing the bench press. Like that stuff is really cool. I just don't know if players would want to do it, would risk that chance of injury. It's really a vacation to them. So I think every league is struggling with all-star games. Basketball is a complete mess right now. Adam Silver's promised, though, it's going to be much better this year, much more competitive, and it's just the same each year. So I think every sport has this problem with how do you handle the Pro Bowl, the All-Star games, and no one really has a good answer for it.
Okay, I think we spent enough time on that.
Yes, that's probably more than enough. Kevin Colbert has a new job. Dave, he has got a consulting gig at Colorado State, assisting the program there as college and NFL in some ways start to blend with transfer portal and NIL deals, all that kind of stuff. Obviously seeing Bill Belichick try to build an NFL model down there in Chapel Hill. So Kevin Colbert, I was just curious how Colorado State came to be. I was trying to find to see if any connections to anybody. The AD that didn't look like it. Jay Norville, the head coach, who didn't look like it. Maybe these things just happened by friend of a friend or whatever the case is. But interesting there, Kevin Colbert helping out a college program.
Kevin Colbert going air raid. I'm a big Jay Norville fan from the time at Nevada, along with Mummy and all like that, and intrigued by obviously through the Carson Strong, Romeo Dubs years and all like that. I like Norville, I like Mummy, and I find it kind of interesting, Kevin Colbert going that route. So I guess he's not retiring, or he didn't like retirement, huh?
Yeah, he was still doing some stuff. He even still works with Pittsburgh. He's part of I think he leads their kind of liaison program of retired players transitioning into their post careers. He's headed that program in Pittsburgh. And so he's still done certainly some things, even with the organization since stepping down in May of 2022. But yeah, good for Colbert, keeping him busy, keeping him engaged in football. Sounds pretty cool.
Do you think he will still have affiliation with the Steelers?
Yeah, like I said, I'm pretty sure he spearheads their kind of retirement program to help players transition from their playing days to their life's work. And so he's done that and seems to be really happy about that. I assume he's still in charge of it. He made those comments maybe a year and a half ago. So yeah, there's still an affiliation in some sense. He's still he's photos of him at like IUP games, and I think he's still got some ties to Robert Morris, all that kind of stuff. So yeah, I think he's still in the area.
Well, I didn't have Kevin Colbert being in the news cycle yesterday.
Yeah, I didn't either. I just love to know the story of how they kind of connected, how that came to be. That'd be kind of cool. Maybe we get to hear that someday. All right, Dave, where to from here? We got some draft talk. As you said, the Shrine game happening last night, wrapping up our coverage there for the week. Our crew did a great job. Hopefully have some roundtables next week to discuss and really get their perspective on the prospects who stood out and those who could fit Pittsburgh, the Senior Bowl this weekend. Where do you want to start here on our draft conversation?
Let's start with the defensive tackle that you just broke down and have the profile on the side of Darius Alexander out of Toledo.
Yeah, it's a guy that I was started writing about and watching a couple days ago, right before the buzz really picked up about Alexander at the Senior Bowl. Reportedly had a really good week. We'll talk to Ephraim and Ross and Jonathan, get their perspective next week on what they saw in person. But then reportedly Alexander has had a meeting with the team, which again, they're going to meet with most, if not all, the Senior Bowl guys, but certainly a name earning plenty of buzz. And I posted the official report this morning. Really good tape. I think coming into the Senior Bowl, projected as a later day 3 guy by the media. I think they're going to catch up to where the NFL actually has him as maybe a round 3 type of guy. Would not surprise me. Really good tape, almost ideal size for a 3-4 defensive end. He's strong, he's explosive, powerful punch in his hands, a really potent bull rush, has some moves off of that, productive, kind of chip on his shoulder, 2-star guy coming out of high school, lightly recruited overall, got better, a guy that you could really see and feel fit Pittsburgh.
Some long arms on him, right?
And yeah, 6'03", 6'3", I think 304, 34-inch arms and 10.5-inch hands. And so well put together.
I think you've gone. Did you do any of his 2023 stuff?
I watched a game against Illinois. Yes.
Okay. It feels like he became a better run defender in 2024. I think he looked a lot the same as a pass rusher overall, but I think the area where he improved the most from 2023 to 2024 was his run defense.
Okay, that's fair. Yeah.
Did you get the sense of that?
I'd have to think about it and look at some of my notes. I mean, he's not going to be a guy great against doubles and some of those combo blocks and down blocks can wash him, but base block one-on-one, I mean, he is strong and stout at the point of attack. He's really hard to move and he can stack and shed. And so I thought he was impactful against the run and pass, just big picture in all the tape that I watched.
It's hard to see this team not liking him.
Right. I think he really fits what they look for. Maybe you wish he was a bit taller because Pittsburgh has, been able and willing to sacrifice some length and still have height. They still like those guys that are 6'5", Logan Lee, Loudermilk, even though those guys weren't super long. But I think, that shouldn't dissuade Pittsburgh from having interest in Alexander. And clearly it hasn't because I think they're showing some interest in the guy.
Let's see. He had 3 bat downs in 2024, 3 bat downs in 2023, 3 bat downs, and he's a little bit older too, isn't he?
That's the big concern. Somebody just told me he's 25 or about to turn 25, but he's an older prospect, which is going to be the big knock on him.
Let's see if we got let's see.
What are you looking up? His age?
Yeah. See if I
couldn't find it. Yeah, I couldn't find it. Somebody said, I know his birthday's in August because I saw a Toledo Twitter post about that, but one of our listeners, Brian, just messaged me mid-show here and said he's going to be 25 on August 26th.
Okay. All right.
So we'll get verification on that, but I'll trust Brian on that. That's going to be the big. 25 is very old for a draft prospect.
Right. But I mean, he's got great tape, without a doubt.
Yeah, the tape is fantastic. I mean, he played 24 when drafted. Yeah, 25 his rookie season, so that'll hurt him. My NFL comp was Jerron Reed. I thought that was a pretty good comp there of what kind of career and what kind of player and style that he has. So yeah, good tape, a riser, good Senior Bowl week, and not that it's a small school thing, but it is nice to see those guys from non-Power 4 play up in events like the Senior Bowl, and that certainly helps the projection. Also played 3-4 system, played over tackle, and so easier projection. Also had a pick 6 against Pitt this year in the bowl game, and so Pittsburgh was watching, seeing how the Panthers were doing in that bowl game. That actually really changed the game. The Panthers were ahead 30-20. Alexander drops in the zone coverage, ball thrown at him, picks it off, 58-yarder the other way. They get back in that game. They win it in overtime. And so, yeah, this guy's just an impact player.
All right. Who else have you looked at, posted about?
We had talked about briefly into the show Wednesday on Will Howard from Ohio State, and I've been trying to tear through some of the day two options at quarterback. Jalen Milroe, who also had a meeting with Mike Tomlin, the Steelers at the Senior Bowl. Jackson Dart from Ole Miss, and Howard. And I just came away impressed by Howard the most of the three. It's the most consistent tape. His touch, his accuracy, his ball placement, the physical tools are good. I don't know if he's going to be a great guy to drive the football over the middle. That's kind of my biggest concern with him. But easily of the three guys, Milroe, Dart, and Howard was my number one of that group.
Because of this quarterback class, is he more than likely going to be overdrafted? In other words, where do you see him going? Second, third to someone?
Second round picks for quarterbacks are actually pretty uncommon. I think that was Lance Zierlein that tweeted that study. It's very concentrated. First round, second round's pretty thin. Then third round, they start taking some flyers again. But I think he'll be the third quarterback taken. Where exactly is that? It just takes one team. Who knows? I feel like round two, it makes the most amount of sense for him. But you never know what one team is thinking.
If the Steelers drafted him, it ended up going that, does it feel like because of where they picked, they'd either have to pick him in the second or trade up in the third to get him?
It feels like just off the top, and again, we're pretty early, they would have to trade up from their current second round spot to go get him early in the second round, like a Will Levis, where the Titans moved up to get him at 34, where they tried to do with Pittsburgh at 33 or 32, I should say.
So you could see him get overdrafted then, right?
I mean, I think he's probably a day two guy, third quarterback. I mean, I think will be drafted. I think it's appropriate to draft him in the second round. So I don't know if I would say he'll get overdrafted.
All right, I haven't deep dived him yet. I've been concentrated on defensive linemen to this point. And I have seen him play. Obviously, Ohio State. Usually on the television. I haven't hyper focused on him. Seems like he's got a decent deep ball.
Yeah, it's a moon ball. It's more touch and arc than it is like high RPM velocity. It is a little rust in that regard, which is a good thing. But yeah, just the playoff run was fantastic. And yes, he was certainly benefited from a ton of weapons at Ohio State. That receiving core was, ridiculous with Jeremiah Smith and Tate and Nick Buka and all those kind of guys. But, some of those passes are just right in the bucket. His touch, his accuracy, his placement, really impressive, high level. Like when I look for a quarterback, Dave, I'm trying to find like, what do you do at an elite kind of level? If you don't have an elite level trait of anything, then it's hard for me to really love you, because I think you have to be elite and really good at something if you're going to be a high end quarterback at the NFL level. And I think that's where Howard is at. But there's no real deficiency in his game overall. I thought he did stand tall under pressure. He's not the most fluid athlete. He runs like Daniel Jones. He's kind of stiff and clunky, but he can run in a line. There is some speed, and he's got prototypical old school quarterback size. He was productive. He's won. Even I watched some Kansas State tape. It wasn't as good, but you still saw the same traits there. So it did translate. It wasn't just because he went to Ohio State. It's
still early in this thing right now, obviously, and I haven't touched the quarterback class like you have yet. Just surface level kind of stuff. But is it fair to think right now, if the Steelers were to draft a quarterback, not in the first round, but before the fourth round, it would be one of Howard or Jackson Dart?
I don't want to rule out Milroe in this process. That was the guy I first had that gut instinct about that I mentioned earlier this month on a previous show. So I don't want to put myself in those boxes. I'm not even sure if they have any interest in Jackson Dart right now. I don't know how much you've watched him. He was at the Senior Bowl this week. I didn't love his tape. I think he's a gritty guy. I think he's super tough and competitive, but I didn't see the high end traits to become a starter.
Okay. Have you changed your mind yet on whether your thinking is in other words, if you're not going all in to get a first round blue chipper, that they shouldn't touch it at all? Or have you kind of come off that a little bit, knowing that there's a possibility that they could take a flyer, second, third, fourth round?
I'm still in the first round camp. I mean, if they did something in the other rounds, then Howard would be my preference. And don't mishear me. I'm not saying they need to draft Will Howard. I'm just saying I liked Will Howard's tape. I thought he had the best tape of the other mid-round or day two, I should say, quarterback. So this is not me banging the table and saying this team has to draft Will Howard in the second round. I'm just saying that I thought he had good tape, and I'll be curious to see what Pittsburgh's interest in him is throughout the pre-draft process.
What was what you watched? What was his best game and his worst game?
I think the Oregon game and the playoff game was his best game. I mean, just the way they tore up the Ducks. I mean, that was the number one overall team, and the way Ohio State came out firing, just ridiculous the way they took it to him. Not even that it was his best game; it was a really bad start. But I like the way he battled against Texas in 2023 at Kansas State. They were down 17-0 early. They were down 27-7. They came back and lost the heartbreaker in overtime. You see some of those real, deep balls and posts and go routes that helped him get back in that game. I don't know if he had a worse game. I need to watch more of his early 2024 tape. I concentrated more on the playoff run because those were the marquee games. The pressure is on. I want to see how you respond in those moments. So I want to go back and watch some of the earlier games in his Ohio State career to maybe see some of the other just progression throughout the season. So that's probably where some of his worst games will lie.
All right. I'll try to catch up this weekend on him to have a little bit more say about Will Howard, maybe on our Monday show. I'll try to throw some tape on him to get a better sense of what we're talking about there.
All right, Dave, you've done some homework on some prospects too, right? Give me the lowdown on some of the guys you've been watching.
Minimal, and this came out of last night, out of the Shrine Bowl. There was, I was kind of trying to pick and choose, I didn't watch the whole game all the way through, but I did have one eye kind of sideways on it. Johnny Walker out of Missouri is an intriguing edge guy. Measured in at the Shrine Bowl at 6'2", 5'8", 246, 33-inch arms, 10-inch hands, 79 3/8-inch wingspan. Looks like he has the ability to play on both sides and be impactful with that. Got some nice hand usage, some nice speed around the edge. Got a very nice bend to him as well too. And because of his size, look, he 6'2", 5'8". His weight and all, like he's not, he's going to be a 3-4 specimen. Outside linebacker type more than anything, and he's going to get pushed down a little bit. I think. Because of that, I think you're looking, at least initially here, probably a late third, fourth round kind of prospect here. And I know the Steelers are not in a heavy market for an edge guy, but if they were looking to add to that room someone to help kind of start developing, probably I haven't looked at his special teams resume, but he's an athletic guy. I would think that he would have some special teams ability to him. If just as an early, looking at some of these edge guys that the Steelers could potentially look at. Once again, I'm not advocating they get into drafting an edge this year, but if they were and wanted to add to that room as a developmental guy, Johnny Walker certainly seems right up their alley.
What'd you say his arm length was? What did he measure in it?
33.
Okay, so long, well put together guy, impactful, 6 forced fumbles last 2 years, 9.5 sacks last year, and not that there's a connection, I'm sure, individually, but it probably doesn't hurt that the Steelers outside linebackers coach Denzel Martin is a Missouri grad as well. Maybe we'll get some intel on from the coaching staff and support staff there. The other guys may not, but I mean, is there an idea of where this guy could get drafted?
I feel just right. I mean, this early, I kind of have him pegged as a late third, somewhere in the fourth, maybe even early fifth, somewhere around there. Because once again, teams are not going to look at him as a base end, right? At 6'2", 5'8", 246. He's classic tweener. So he's going to have to be in the right system, 3-4 type system, outside linebacker. That he can play on his feet. I think I know that at this point. I think he can rush from his hand in the ground in certain opportunities as well too. I just think the athletically, I think he has a nice rush plan, nice swipe, a nice bend, dip, rip kind of thing. I haven't researched him enough to know what his power, his speed to power and all is. That would be next and all. But he just caught my eye last night as someone that I want to deep dive into.
All right, yeah, good deal. If he is a mid-round guy, then probably not on Pittsburgh's radar. But they're going to cut Preston Smith. They like to have good depth. They showed that last year. Could they go, get a late-round pick on an edge guy? Not the craziest thought in the world.
Right.
Anybody else?
Other than that, that's all I was looking at the Toledo kid and Walker.
And you liked Alexander's tape. I know you mentioned
Oh
it, but
yeah,
just kind of
yeah. I did. I think he's certainly in their sights.
yeah, sounds like it.
I
All
don't
right,
think he's
Dave.
a round one guy, obviously, but I could see him where the Steelers pick in the second or in the third.
Yeah, I mean, I think third round. Again, the age is just going to be the real concern because is this a one contract guy? He's
Right.
24, about to turn 25, 4-year deal, puts you almost at 30 when your rookie contract is up. That could be the thing that really hurts his value, unfortunately.
Right.
But, you get him in the fourth round, it's kind of a value. Because in the fourth round, like, I don't care how old you are in the fourth round. Like, you're one contract guy. If you make it through your whole contract as a day 3 pick, I'm pretty happy with the selection overall. So that may end up pushing him down. But it could be to Pittsburgh's benefit if they want to double dip in your scenario.
Right. And this is a deep defensive line class, too. So,
Yeah, very, very deep overall. All right, Dave, anything else here to talk about? That was kind of my draft thoughts. I'm still working through some other prospects. Devin Neal from Kansas, the running back, little shifty speed guy. Going through the tape, I've got a couple questions. People wondering if we're going to do reports on him. You had shared, we mentioned it, and this is kind of the origin of some of these studies that we do, the running back explosive play rates. And you put together from all the top running backs in this class, the rates. That was a really good study by you. You tweeted it out. What are your kind of impressions? Any additional takeaways from putting together all the information?
let me send it to you real quick so you have it up in front
Yeah,
of you
thank
here. I sorted it by total attempts in here, and what I did is I went and found the 20-yard run, 20 or more yard runs, and the 10 or more yard runs to kind of find out the percentage of each based on their career carries, and leading the list as far as carries go of I think I have, 25 running backs on this list. You're the guy that you've already broke down, Taj Brooks out of Texas Tech, exits this of this list of players with the most college attempts. He had 879. His 20-yard explosive, and you've watched the tape. Maybe you can back this up. Very, very low 20 plus percentage as far as explosive runs, just 3.9%. He only had 34 runs of 20 yards or longer during his college career. His 10-yard runs, he had 115 of those. And look, volume obviously plays into this, but a 13.1%, which is kind of low, relatively speaking, to this list overall. So you've watched more. He's just not an overly explosive playback, right?
Yeah, that's very clear on his tape. His game is not long speed, burst, winning the edge, breaking that 60-yard type of run. He's a gap scheme, find the hole, patience, vision, plow ahead. I think he's a strong guy. He's thickly built. I don't think his power is overwhelming. I think he can run a little tall, maybe get his pants down a little bit. But point is, yeah, his game is not speed, and so there's no shock to see his numbers be as low as they are.
I think, and obviously Ashton Genty is third on this list in total carries of 750, had a 20 yard or better percent explosive run rate of 5.6%. And I think comparatively speaking, that would put him probably right around the middle when it comes to this list. Of the 10-yard run, 16.5%, which is probably a little bit better than average when it comes to this list of backs. So long story short, he matches up when it comes to this class and explosive runs of 20 yards or 10 yards or better.
Yeah, we should get an average too. We should pull the numbers on that to figure out what the baseline numbers for all these guys are to kind of have a little bit of relativity. I mean, it sounds like he's about average. You do wonder, like you said, if volume maybe hurts that ability to have those huge popping run rates because the volume of carries is so high. And of course, he saw just so much attention at Boise State because he was the number one guy every team and coach and coordinator had to try to game plan against, and yet he still ran wild. But yeah, his numbers were a little bit lower than I thought they'd be, but still, I think acceptable.
Let me see if I can find you an average based on what I have done here I think I have 28 running backs on this list. Give me just a minute here and I will figure out.
While you do that, it's interesting. The guy I just mentioned, Devin Neal, of the list of running backs you have here is second in carries at 760. And while he's listed, I think, at 5'11", 215, we'll see what the actual weigh-in. Actually, we should get his actual weigh-in. He was at the Shrine Bowl, but he's not built like Brooks or or Genty or Hampton or any of these guys that are kind of on that list of Ohio State running backs. And so watching his tape, he's a different style of guy. He's a maybe not a true burner, but he's got really good speed overall. He's got great quickness, lateral agility. Still watching his tape. I'm not done with Devin Neal yet, but interesting guy. Pittsburgh's looking for kind of a blend of a guy with some size, but then has that kind of big play burst, can get the edge ability. Devin Neal might be an interesting guy to watch. I'm just trying to pull up exactly what he came in at. He looks smaller than 5'11", 215. Which was what ESPN was listing him at. But let's see what he actually was. Was he not at the Shrine Bowl? Maybe it was Senior Bowl.
Who? Neal?
Yeah, Devin Neal. I was trying to think which All-Star game he was at. I thought he was at one of these.
Yeah,
one of these events.
Look at the list here.
Hold on, let me pull up. Okay, he did. He was at the Senior Bowl. He came in at 5'10" 3/4", 220. So he came in basically right on. So he's as big as listed.
All right. I have the averages here of the 28 running backs. The 20-yard explosive run rate was 4.8% for the group. And obviously Genty's above that at 5.6. Neal is above that at 5.3%. Judkins out of Ohio State's a little lower than that at 4.3%. And the 10-yard or greater percentage rate average is 15% for the entire group. Genty came in at 16.5, Neal at 15.1, and Judkins at 14.7.
So who stands out the most impressively on this list just based off of these two data points? It looks like RJ Harvey from UCF has the best rates overall, 579 career carries, 7.4 rate of 20-plus yards, and 21-1 of 10-plus yards.
Yeah, him and out of Central Florida, and then probably, I guess, Travion Henderson out of Ohio State, 6.3 explosive run rate on 20-yard carries. Is that that's second to Harvey, I believe. And then his 10-yard gains was 17.4%, which is probably third, I think, or fourth overall on this list.
Yeah, so Ohio State guys, see if they have interest in them. I imagine Pittsburgh will. I know we have a report up on Harvey. Interesting guy, real squatty type of guy, but there is real speed there. I think it matches the tape and the stats they mesh together. So would Pittsburgh be willing to do that? They don't generally draft. These are not small schools, but they really like the power for top pedigree type of guys. Will Harvey qualify? We'll see, but name to keep an eye on.
Another name to keep an eye on that I did not put on my list of running backs here is that Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt, who out of Arizona this past season by way of, I think, New Mexico is where he was before that. He was the Shrine Bowl offensive player of the game last night. What did he have? 97 yards on 11 carries and all. And I'm thinking, well, how the hell did I miss that guy on my list? Well, he only played in one game last year, evidently for Arizona. And I think that was the first game of the season. And he had like 13 carries or something like that. And then didn't play again. I said, okay, well, what was the injury there? He was the kid that had the eligibility issues that kept waiting to hear from and ended up having to sit out because of eligibility issues from what was the college that he was at?
New Mexico?
No, it was somewhere in Alabama, I think. Something to do with that.
Why was there an issue with the transfer? Because everyone's leaving and jumping school to school. Is there any clarity on that?
I'm trying to remember what Alabama State claims he played in only 4 games, then switched numbers with another running back. That it was that anyway, there was just eligibility issues at Alabama State, evidently.
Okay, interesting. Yeah, I don't know the whole backstory there, but that's unfortunate. Kept him out. most of the season at
And
Arizona.
he's an older guy too, because I mean he was at Alabama State for 2019, 2020, 2021, 2022, then went to New Mexico in 2023, and then Arizona in 2024. So he was forced to sit out after one game because of some sort of eligibility issues relating to Alabama State time.
Yeah, not a good combination of age and not playing basically hardly at all in 24, but good to see him have a strong showing. He was fresh for the Shrine game, I guess. That probably helped a little bit, but we'll see if we can maybe find some older tape on him.
All right. That's
Any
all
other
I got as far as any other tape that I've really gone into.
All right, good. Yeah, we're getting through our episode, I think, past 40 reports. And so we are miles ahead of where we've been in the past. And so we are speeding along, and we'll pick things back up here as the guys get back from the All-Star games. All right, Dave, anything else to talk about today?
We shall get to some reader emails, I think.
Yeah, we wanted to save some of those. Didn't do any Wednesdays, so hit us with some emails, Dave.
All right, Deshaun Campbell says, wondering, can you guys do a draft profile on Travion Henderson, the running back out of OSU, explosive back who can take it to the house from anywhere and attack the edges. Also, one thing that worries me about Jackson Dart, he says, is he's only had 9 snaps under center in college, and I don't think he would that would play out well in Pittsburgh. He was asked something about that yesterday during the Senior Bowl thing, and he said something about youth football. I don't remember what all he said, but he claims that he has no issues under center. But I mean, it definitely is something worth looking into because obviously did not do a lot of under center in college there. Do we have something coming on Travion Henderson yet?
I don't know if we have anything in the hopper, but we're going to. We're going to end up writing, like I said, 300 plus reports. So there will be a Henderson report at some point.
Stay tuned, Deshaun. Ben Dermont writes in, he says he's enjoyed the offseason content so far. I know things look bleak, but I think one thing to be optimistic about is the job Omar and Andy Waddle have done so far since they have taken over. I think the roster has improved tremendously, he says, for a team that wants to build through the draft. The Steelers really struggle finding talent, especially 2018 to 2022. However, the last 2 drafts have been really solid, he says. I also think the new regime is willing to spend a bit more in free agency. He says, while ultimately our success is tied to finding a quarterback, the roster still needs to get better, which I think we are doing year over year. What do you think about the job Omar and Andy have done the last 2 years? Do you agree they have made significant improvements? I think overall the draft classes have been okay. I think free agency is where this team is, and Tomlin gets part of those, gets some shrapnel out of that as well too. I don't think they've done a good enough job in free agency since Omar has assumed the job.
Yeah, I think the timeline to judge some front office members are a bit more extended than head coaches. So I was still a little bit of jury out, even though Khan is no longer new to this team. He took over for May of 2022, and I mean he's been on the job for a decent amount of time now. I think there's been a good thought of refocusing this team and trying to get back to the trenches and build up the O-line. A lot of investments there, which has been really smart and needed and long overdue. The question is going to be just how well do these guys develop, and that's going to be the real kind of. Maybe you shouldn't judge Khan that way because that gets in the coaches and not part of it kind of goes past his job. I don't know. I'm kind of hedging around the question, I guess. I mean, the overall results are the results, and they have been the same. So this team has done a couple different things, but the bottom line is the results have not dramatically changed, and that has to change. And that's going to be the mission of guys like Omar Khan.
And look, you've got to this year's very important when it comes to some of these previous draft classes. You got to really see a huge step forward out of a guy like Keanu Benton this next year. Joey Porter Jr.'s got to take it a significant step this next year. The second year with these offensive linemen, and obviously didn't have Faetano due to injury for most of it there. So how a lot of how their drafting history or how we judge how their drafting has gone will be dependent on the 2025 season with a lot of these young guys.
Yeah, what I'm trying to get
Jones, at. I mean, go
Benton,
down the list.
Porter, all those guys. How do they develop? McCormick, yeah. So what I'm trying to get at is that it's still going to be. I think 2025 will probably start getting a better grade on Omar Khan as these young guys develop and their career arcs become a little more known and established.
All right, Craig Sampson writes in, thanks for making the postseason bearable with fantastic insights and great content. Thanks, Craig. Listen, the truth of the matter is, and the core of the problem is that the Steelers do not know how to develop players and are not innovative or creative. He says you really have to be a natural talent like TJ or George Pickens to really be successful with the Steelers. If you are just okay now, but have all the tools and a high ceiling like Broderick Jones or Justin Fields, you will always remain just okay with the Steelers because the Steelers have zero innovation. He says the Steelers do not adapt to their players, but make players adapt to their conservative, no innovation type of play. They are stuck in their ways. Honestly, I think this mentality and how Pittsburgh defines itself as hard run and bully ball is another way of saying we don't have creativity and we don't develop players, and this is our fault. He says, thanks for letting me vent, Craig.
Yeah, I mean, it's probably a little too extreme of a comment. I understand it's venting and frustration there. There's probably some level of truth. It's probably in a middle ground. They're certainly not the most creative or inventive team. They're probably, if you're ranking it, bottom third at best.
Did Benton and Porter take the steps that you thought wanted them to take this past season?
No.
And obviously Broderick Jones did not.
Right. Broderick Jones went backwards. I think Benton and Porter took small steps forward, but not the leaps that I was hoping they would, which you often see in sophomore years, especially when guys play a lot as rookies. There's a lot of tape and they can really accelerate the learning curve in their second seasons. I mean, I think a guy like Justin Fields, I think Pittsburgh showed growth and development with him. I think Fields was clearly better than in Pittsburgh than he was in his time in Chicago. He played with instruction more, cleaned up mechanically, played smarter, took better care of the football. Now, is he the franchise guy Chicago drafted him to be? No, but I think just to use one example that the reader referenced, I mean, I think Fields showed improvement from his time in Chicago.
Okay, but what about the guys that they drafted and all? Would those three guys on a different team would have had, would they be further along in their development?
I mean,
would
again,
they been more productive?
It goes into hypotheticals. I'm sure on some set of teams they'd be better. I'm sure on some set of teams they'd be busts. I mean, it's just obviously, again, Pittsburgh is not the most inventive, creative, innovative team in the world. I think they have lag behind in analytics, which they're, I think, trying to finally catch up on, but you're digging yourself out of a hole to begin with. So to answer some of those things, we can debate it for hours and not really go anywhere with the conversation. But I just mentioned Fields because the reader mentioned Fields, and I thought you saw him develop, and we'll see in year two if he comes back, does he develop more?
All right, we need to see significant. If this team wants to compete and at least make a playoffs, guys like Benton, Porter, and Broderick Jones we have to see better play out of the three of them, right?
Yes, but especially the offensive line in general, the young group. Now, Frazier obviously had a really good rookie year. Mm-hmm. Did the team develop him? I mean, obviously they did, but I think he's also just a really good player out of the box. McCormick, I thought, developed nicely overall this year. So there are things, but you talk about key developments. Yes, all those names you mentioned, absolutely. But the O-line is going to really make or break this team and how well they drafted or how well they didn't draft.
All right, Brett Nile has a cash question in here. The precedent I would like to see them in is the unwillingness to give out one-year deals. This seems to be the perfect year to end the policy. This has hurt you in the past as guys have chosen to go where they can to get one-year deal instead of the 2-year deal from the Steelers. Invariably on these 2-year deals, they end up cutting that player and carrying the dead money the next year anyway. To me, I want a guy to play well enough to earn a free agent deal somewhere else. If nothing else, maybe you get compensatory draft pick. That's my rant there. So I guess he's saying they're unwilling. He wants to see more of the 1-year deals, but probably I'm willing to bet not the veteran benefit style deals. He's wanting to see more of the midline $6, $7, $8 million, $9 million deals for 1 years to guys to give them, in other words, be a better quality of player, but also something where they have something to play for because they're playing for an even bigger deal the next year.
Yeah, the 1 year prove it deal, I think, is kind of what you're looking for of decent money, but not huge money. And if it doesn't work, it's a 1 year thing. Yeah, it's a fair point, and we'll see exactly where Pittsburgh is at cap space wise. But they're going to have as much cap space this year as probably any season in recent memory. Correct me if I'm wrong, Dave, but yeah, I get it.
I mean, didn't they sort of do that with Ogunjobi though on a 1 year and then re-upped him?
Did they do a 1 year deal with
Wasn't that a
Ogunjobi?
1 year, 8 million or something, or up?
I think. I mean, that also came because he failed his physical
Right.
with wherever he was going to
There
go,
were
and that came in the
qualifiers
summer.
involved with it.
Yeah, and I think he's saying like you need to see that more frequently, like to have multiple maybe contracts of 1 year deal between $4 and $10 million, and really go all in on that attempt.
Well, my old man used to tell me, David, he said you can put your wants in one hand and crap in the other and see which one fills up the fastest.
But do you like the idea? Do you like the
yeah, I have nothing wrong with that. If that's what you have to get them on, but then you're using more cap per player that way on those 1 year deals, and it's usually easy to map out what if it's a guy that they like, and it's above X amount of dollars, they try to get them to a 2 or 3 year deal.
I guess the concern, what is the downside to doing a 1 year deal? Like what besides the salary and the cash and the cap?
I guess it is that they do exceed their value, and then the likelihood of you getting, in other words, you have a constant turnover of the guys that work out, because you're probably not going to want to pay them the top end of the market if they do well on a 1 year prove it deal.
Yeah, I get that. I think the concern is the constant amount of turnover that could come with that. It's hard to project out your future, your draft plans, because are you going to keep this guy? Is he going to walk? Is it going to work out? Is it not? There's some uncertainty it creates. And also, frankly, it does feel like kind of a thing that teams who are typically more all in and contenders should do to try to get them over that top, that key veteran you give on a 1 year deal, take a chance on. Is Pittsburgh in that position right now? And I'm not rejecting the idea out of hand. I think it makes sense this year because of the cap situation. But I'm just kind of playing devil's advocate of what are some of the downsides to it. Is Pittsburgh in a position to be handing out 1 year deals to go 10-7 and then lose half those guys again in the offseason?
Right, and be back in the same thing where they got to get another crop of 1 year deals.
Yeah. Is that really pushing the franchise forward?
I mean, I understand his the precedent. Sure. I mean, there's look, just throw that in the list of the other precedents that I'd like to see change. But we've got to walk a fine line on this show of what would you meaning us do versus what we think the team. We can sit here and spend hours upon hours and episode upon episodes of they need to do this, they should do this, till we're blue in the face. But are we doing the listenership and the fans a disservice by talking about things that at our core belief and studies and understanding of the franchise, we're fairly sure are not going to happen? Where is the balance of painting a picture of what could be versus what is likely to be? And I've always more, and us as a site, and just in general, what we try to do at the Depot is try to provide more of a picture of what is going to happen with commentary on what does happen, with a slight mix of what we think should happen, as to not get into unrealistic where every show's about they should do this, knowing good and well that this is not going to, in other words, painting false hopes and expectations.
I mean, there's a balance. There's both. I think it's important to talk about both. I think it's even more important to talk about what we think should change, considering this is a franchise that feels stuck. If things were running on all cylinders, then you probably talk less about what we like to see different and just talk about what they're doing and why it's working, etc. So, I mean, there's always a mixture of both. Let me ask you, if Art Rooney came out of a genie bottle and could grant you one wish and one precedent to change for this franchise, what would it be?
It'd kind of be twofold. It would be you're
asking for more wishes.
Okay, it would be the guaranteed money and the way they attack free agency.
Yeah, in terms of you're saying past year one and then
Right. The only,
unbelievers.
and that's why I say it pays into, it kind of plays into that hypothetical hierarchy line of player, homegrown players versus outside guys. Uh, long story short, I think they should, if they want to compete better for some of these higher quality free agents on multi-year deals, they're going to have to guarantee more than the first year money for them. And then on top of it, they're going to have to attack a higher quality of free agency above the Cam Hayward hierarchy line where it sits right now. And I'm interested to see if they exceed that line this year of $14.5 million average yearly value, as to not quote unquote step on toes. Or are they willing to go out and spend on a high dollar wide receiver that might exceed a Minka Fitzpatrick average yearly value, or come close to be the highest or second highest player on the team from the outside versus what they have right now?
I agree. That seems to be their philosophy. I'm not disputing that. I'm just wondering, have they ever spoken about that publicly? Has there ever been a question or any comment about hierarchy and making sure players are kind of paid in line? Have they ever commented on that ever
No,
before?
I don't think they have. They don't want to talk about cash or cap.
Yeah.
Uh, Omar will just, we're trying to build the best roster. They'll sidestep. They're not going to talk about, unless they get into talking about franchise quarterback, and that's why we did this, and talking about we don't extend players 2 years out. So it'll be interesting to see what happens with Chris Boswell this offseason, right? And if you roll back to how they treated Antonio Brown a couple of years ago, or the way they treated TJ Watt and Minka Fitzpatrick with their deals with the new money past the first year, and that's because they are top of the market. There was no way around it. You're not going to get the deal done any other way than that. So no, I don't think they have or will discuss that kind of. If I could sit Omar Khan down and hook him up to the lie detector serum or test or whatnot, I'd say, do you guys have a policy when it comes to hierarchy and average yearly pay, when it comes to attacking outside free agency? And I mean, it would be a two-part question once again. Is there a quote unquote hierarchy line that you adhere to? And then is there also a first year fully guaranteed? And he say, well, look, Dave, there are guarantees. I'm talking fully guaranteed money.
And it seems that there is.
Right. I
So
want to hear him say it.
Sure. No, I understand. I just wasn't sure if they were ever asked, even Kevin Colbert, since this is a long-standing tradition that predates Omar Khan's tenure as GM, if they've ever been on the record even referencing something similar to that, but nothing came to mind, so I wanted to ask you.
Now, look, I mean, why was Patrick Queen the highest paid APY guy last year? Inflation, right?
Yeah, I mean, the cap's gone up, and it went up a huge amount last year, and yeah, the general trend is players are getting paid a whole lot more than they used to.
But even so, even though he set the new high standard watermark, it still was below kind of the threshold in the hierarchy. And on top of that, they only guaranteed his first year money.
Right. It was a Steelers deal done on Steelers deal terms. I'm not even sure, was Queen the highest percentage of cap space for outside free agent? I'm not even sure if he was, honestly, if you made it relative to the cap, if he was number one or not.
Oh, I had to look at, I advise people all the time to look at the cash spent on a player and guaranteed money, and not the cap hit.
Right. Well, either way, relative to cash, relative to cap, to figure out what percentage of the cap were they chewing up to see who truly was the highest paid. I want to say Jeff Hardings was up there too, whenever he signed a way back when. But anyway, that's besides the point.
All right, let's get to the final 3 bullet points of this email here. Should they give James Daniels a 1-year make-good contract? They have the cash and the cap space with Daniels back as your starter and McCormick as the backup. You're set at interior offensive line, and if Daniels plays well, you can get a comp pick next year when he leaves next year. When it comes to Daniels specifically, with the injury that he's coming off of, it all depends on the price. To me, would I be willing to sign him to a 1-year make good contract at the right price? My answer would be yes.
It's a good thought. I hadn't really considered it from the comp aspect, but you're right. If he's healthy and plays well this year, then you get the comp pick that you're not going to likely get otherwise. I mean, just his health and recovery is going to dictate when he signs and how much he signs for and that whole timetable. I would like to get McCormick snaps though and help his development too and not be the backup. So I'm not sure where I come in on that, but interesting thought.
For the right price, you'll have nearly anybody on your roster though, right?
Right, but he's not going to sign for the minimum. I can't expect. Right. I wouldn't expect that. It's not going to be what he would have gotten had he been healthy. It's probably going to be $5-6 million.
Would you pay him that?
I'd have to sit on it, to be honest with you. I see the allure and the upside to that. But again, I'd like to get McCormick and these young offensive line snaps. So I'm not sure, to be honest.
All right. Would you sign Javon Hargrave to a 1-year deal? Is his next question. Me, yes, absolutely. Especially if it's I'm not going to give Javon Hargrave $12 million. But I mean, if
he's not signing for the veteran minimum.
No, he's not signing for the veteran minimum either. So are we talking $4 or $5 million is a fair price for him?
I mean, he's gotten paid really, really well previously. I mean, obviously he's older. He's coming off the injuries. Value's not what it was. I don't know what that number is. Is it 6, 7? I feel like it's a little higher than maybe 4 or 5. I just wouldn't sign him. I don't know exactly what he's going to offer you that you're missing. And he's 32, and I want to get younger on the D line, not older. A guy coming off injury.
I want him as a mentor, as a snap eater for these younger guys to help groom him. And I think on the right snap count. In the right rotation, I think he could, assuming he comes back from this injury and all fine, even at his age, I think you can get some productive snaps out of him if the price is right.
So the role I could only see for him is a Montravius Adams role.
Sure.
I mean, is you going to pay $6 million for that? I mean,
I would dump Montravius Adams obviously and put that towards it. So yeah, I think that. Is Montravius Adams at let's say $6 million an upgrade? Let's say a $4 million, $3.5 million net an upgrade for this roster.
Is Hargrave an upgrade? Yeah, he would be over Adams. Yes.
Now it all once again, this all comes down. It's a very loosely based question here. Is would you sign Javon Hargrave to a 1-year deal? You got to give me a price. Everything has its price.
Right, 1 year for $1 million, sure. 1 year for $12 million. No, yeah, it depends so much on that. And again, it depends on his health as well. I just don't have, it's not my first thing I go to when I think about D-line upgrades because I think there's a lot more work to do. I want to get younger. I need to have more longer term outlooks, guys who are going to play more snaps, replace Ogunjobi snaps. And Hargrave to me is not doing those things.
All right. I think he can at the right price. Once again, I would be all over Javon Hargrave on a 1-year deal for $5-6 million. Yes, I would.
All right. Fair enough.
But I haven't, because he's not technically a free agent yet. You're not seeing any market values on him right now. But his market value obviously is decreased than what he last signed that last contract for, right?
Yeah, I forget exactly what it was. It was a huge deal with the Niners, so it was like $15 million per year, which he's not going to come close to this time around. I wouldn't assume.
Let's see what actually that was with him. What his APY is.
Might have been more than that.
It's 21. Yeah, it was 21, and obviously, it's hard. He probably thinks he's worth at least half of that, right?
If he does, he's got to probably maybe a rude awakening come for agency.
And it won't be the Steelers at $10 million. I mean, it would obviously have to be lower than that. And if he's at that price point, then the Steelers are going to try to sign him to a 2 or 3 year deal.
Which, yeah, they would still never do because then the money just gets absurd. Yeah, is he healthy? He's coming off what he tear his tricep, bicep, one of those
Well,
muscles.
you could do it with Hargrave at an APY, let's say of 9 million, but you would have to make the cash only be like 10 or 11 million in year one. You'd have to be able to get, in other words, you'd have to go on with it under the assumption that this might be a 1 year, $11 million deal, if that makes sense.
Yeah, but
and then you got to get him on the field if the
right.
Steelers aren't going to pay him that kind of money to play 300 snaps.
Right. If he's on Travis Adams, you couldn't pay that. He'd have to replace Ogunjobi, and he's just no. Yeah. So we'll see. It'll get talked about when he gets released. Assume is it a definite he's getting released? I guess it is.
I think it's be surprised if he's not.
Right.
But to answer the question, yes, if the price, it depends on the price. Number 3, what position would you make the big free agent splash this offseason? He says to me, it's cornerback.
Have to look at a list again. Who's all out there? My first answer is wide receiver.
It would either be wide receiver or corner.
And I say receiver because it's a really good free agent class. The draft class is not as strong, and you want some veterans who can come in right away and hopefully help you rather than the rookie who might need a little bit of time.
True or false? They will sign both a wide receiver and cornerback to more than $9 million average yearly value this offseason. Free agency.
Receiver, I'm very confident saying yes. I really have not yet figured out their cornerback plan or intent. So for the moment, I will say no, but reserve my opinion to change on that.
You would look hard and heavy, though, at the corner list closer to the start of the new league year, though, right?
Yes, I will be doing that. And I still think I'm still going to bang the drum for slot corner. Right. Everyone thinks about outside corner. Slot corner's been a mess for years, been a rotating group of guys. Yes, Beanie came in and showed some promise, but it can't just be Beanie again next year and just hoping that he pans out. You need some guys with versatility to be able to give more flexibility on third down to spin Minka around, somebody in a Cam Sutton type of role, but just better than Cam Sutton. I think that's an underrated need for this defense.
It's just going to be an act. They've got the cash to spend, but how much of that's going to go to TJ Watt? You're talking about above and beyond what TJ's on. I mean, you could foresee them having to give TJ over $30 million, but he's already on the books as a cash expenditure. So let's see, TJ's set to earn 21, a little more than 21 million in actual cash. So if you sign him to a new deal, let's say you gave him, I don't know, $40 first year cash total, with signing bonus and everything.
Million.
Right. So you're only spending another $19 million in cash there, additional above and beyond what's already on the books, So another why what I'm getting at is, they're going to have cash to spend. How are they going to spend it?
Yeah, no, we ran through the numbers last week about it. Even with a Watt contract, even with a quarterback you pay, it's still like 50, 70 million you got to spend it in cash. Let me ask you this. Doesn't Pittsburgh have to make TJ Watt the highest paid player at his position again? Because you couldn't make him second or third because then the guarantees get all screwed up and then you're breaking precedent. So don't they have to get him done before like Micah Parsons gets done and those guys get done?
You better.
So that actually can be really interesting to see how they work that.
Right, because if you wait, the meter's running.
And if Micah, because Parsons is going to become the highest paid edge rusher in football, he's going to surpass Nick Bosa. And, then you as a team, do you want to then have to top that if you're Pittsburgh for TJ Watt, who is older?
And you got Garrett sitting out there waiting. These guys are sitting there watching each other, right? And
so shouldn't there be motivation for Pittsburgh to get this done by late June?
Maybe before that, if possible.
Yeah, like
because you're not waiting on the cap space to do it.
Mm-hmm.
The cash, the cash is the cash.
I think once you get the cap number locked in, which you already have a good idea for, but once that number becomes official, you start doing some contract talks with TJ Watt. And once you get past the quarterback situation, I guess quarterback first and then TJ Watt.
Right. But I guess where I was going with this is, what's the free agency situation? Are there going to be a lot of 6 to $9 million APY type ads, more than they need to get away from these veterans. So many of these veteran benefit contracts that they expect these guys to come in and be 500 snap contributors.
Yeah, I know you love them, and I get there's no risk, but you get what you pay for, kind of thing. And often they're just giving you nothing but some empty calories.
Now they did do well on Deshaun Elliott. We can agree on that.
Yeah, but that was not veteran minimum
right.
benefit though. That was a 2-year deal at a modest amount. That was good. Art Rooney, for whatever it's worth, I don't want to take it literally, but he, I think in an interview with Pomp, he said, we should have some flexibility to bring in a free agent or two. And I kind of take that as like higher end free agents. And so I think that's kind of maybe their overall thought, maybe 2 high price, quote unquote, free agents this year.
I'll be disappointed if that number's not 3.
But I'm saying like high price. They're not going to bring in just 2 free agents, but like 2 free agents that maybe double-digit average yearly value is kind of my interpretation of those comments. They'll bring in more than obviously 2 guys in general.
Right. I'm hoping that we're having conversations about notable free agents of the list being at least 3.
Of, let's say, 10 million average yearly value or more?
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm hoping.
Potentially. I'm gonna expect 2 for whatever it's worth.
Right. I think it's fairly easy to expect 2. Yeah.
So you would agree on receiver?
Yeah.
And then you think corner is the other one?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm trying to think what other position could it be if not corner, which is fair. I'm not
2 corners.
Defensive line. Yeah. 2 receivers. D-line, but I feel like they're going to go draft on D-line.
Right.
So I don't know. Yeah. It's a fair thought.
All right. Amazingly, I think we're about 2-hour mark. How about that?
Find a way to let's get us over 2 hours, Dave. Just one last thought. Maybe I'm overreacting to it, but I saw you tweet about last night. Jim Rome had former NFL player on his show reacting to Julian Edelman's comments and Matt Patricia's comments about the Steelers, kind of roasting them, praising and roasting them about they're consistent and they win, but they're kind of just do their own do the same thing over and over again, and you kind of know what you're going to get from them. What was your take on that? Seemed a lot of pushback. People really hammering Pittsburgh on that.
I think it's easy to do. Time of the year, the shape of the defense right now. Terrell Austin's, the pushback on him, the pushback on Tomlin, just the way the season ending, the timing of all this early in the offseason. It's easy to have former Patricia and Edelman go right to the top of the charts, bashing on the Steelers because they're former Patriots, because of the way it happened. I do think it is fair, like you, to push back that in recent times we're seeing less of that, a lot less than that. But it's an easy hit, and it's easy to get amplified because it does go to the top of the charts. It's just an easy target.
Yeah, it's funny because Edelman has made this criticism before. He made it like last year. I think last summer even we wrote about it, but the comments getting picked up the second time around. I mean, I get some of the critiques, and we can talk about where Pittsburgh has lagged behind, but it's just funny to me because Edelman's point was about, when he was, linebackers on receivers, and whenever he was a line number 3, the innermost slot receiver, he would just dominate and feast, which he would. That's like the one thing Pittsburgh has cleaned up and fixed. They've done a good job. They don't get burned. They don't put John Bostic on Keenan Allen like they used to do. And so it's kind of funny to see the media react to those comments when it is maybe one of the few things Pittsburgh's done a great job adjusting to. They don't get burned by empty sets and by, number 3 slot receivers like they used to anymore.
But it's easy to amplify. That's, like I said, because of the time of year, because of who's saying it, because Jim Rome's got a voice. It's easy to amplify. This time of year, it's easy to blow that stuff up, especially, once again, the way the defense coming off the season, the defense played in general.
Sure, I understand.
All right.
We'll come back on Monday, probably do some roundtables later next week, maybe Wednesday, Friday. And so Monday, no idea what we'll talk about, but we'll find some trouble to get into, you and I, Dave.
Obviously, and it'll probably be another 2-hour show. But in the meantime, you can follow me on Twitter/X at Steelers Depot. Follow Alex at Alex_Kozora. Follow the show at Terrible Podcast. Email the show, theterriblepodcast@gmail.com. If you like what we do and want to donate, SteelersDepot.com. Hit the donate button. Also, if you'd like an ad-free version of the site, SteelersDepot.com. Hit the ad-free button. We have an iOS app for the site now. You can find that at the Apple Store by searching Steelers or Steelers Depot. We invite you to take that for a spin. Let us know what you think about it when it comes to that. So until Monday. As always, thanks for listening to the Terrible Podcast with Dave and Alex.